Welcome back for a very special video. As part of our 70th anniversary, Harrop's made the trip to the National Motor Museum. There is an absolutely iconic collection of Holden cars, and we've got a very special guest to introduce you to. Let's go. We're incredibly privileged to have Richard Ferlazzo, former design director for Holden, with us to showcase these incredible vehicles. And it's just a fantastic capture of everything Holden. And you had such a key part of so many of these vehicles.
Yeah, well, firstly, fantastic to revisit the relationship we had with Harrop for many, many years, Holden and design in particular with Harrop. And isn't this a great spot to look at these cars? You know, what we have here, the cream of the crop of Holden's classic cars, production cars and concept cars that were built over many, many years. And what better place? The best museum in the country, the birthplace of Holden in South Australia. And what a great collection. Can't wait to get around and show you.
Harrop's got an incredible history with 70 years being celebrated this year, and Holden for so many years. While the brand and manufacturing no longer exists, it's held and viewed so passionately by most of our customers and a lot of people within Australia. And having these cars here is really special.
You're quite right. I mean, the Holden really was one of those icon brands of Australia. And in fact, it's one of the oldest brands in transport anywhere in the world. If you take it back to the 1850s, when
Wow.
James Alexander Holden began making saddles, and you can call that transport, maybe a bit of a stretch, but not many other countries, or companies I should say, continued that tradition for over 100 years. So it's something that Australians can be very proud of.
And the engineering excellence that came out of Holden was really world class, and some of these concept cars will really highlight that as well. But I think the first selection of cars, which is incredible, is the Milestone cars. So do you want to talk us through some of those over the years?
Yeah, let's have a look at the production Milestone Holdens.
Let's go back to the very beginning. Number one, Holden.
Yes, indeed. Now, Holden, of course, was making cars much earlier than this for General Motors and other car companies. In those days, they were the preeminent bodybuilder in the country. But this is the first car that was actually called a Holden. And the official title for it is a 48215. So in 1948, this car was produced for the Australian market. And what a great car it was to suit our environment. You know, we had smaller British cars like Morrises and Oxfords and things like that, and we had the larger American cars. But this one was a sweet spot. It had a small six-cylinder engine, a tough body, high ground clearance for our conditions, plenty of room for a family, and an affordable price. And of course, all cars were kind of expensive back then. Now, it's affectionately known as the FX in later years, but that was posthumously attributed after the FJ came along. So the early days was numbers. So 48215 is the correct nomenclature for this car. And it really set the scene for the future of Australian automotive landscape.
An absolute icon. And then
It is indeed.
moving along, it wasn't that long until 1 million cars were produced.
Correct. Now there were other models in between, so we went from the 48215 to the FJ and then FE and FC. But the million car, the first million Holden, came along in 1962 with the EJ. This was another architecture again by this stage. This would have been the third architecture. And of course, the very popular EH followed as a facelift from this.
Sure.
So again, more models in between. We're missing, HD and HR in this row.
These were all manufactured in South Australia, or did it?
Oh, these are manufactured all around the country.
Right.
After the war, it was all about populate or perish. And the car industry was the biggest employer. So it really served a great purpose, not just in automotive landscape, but for the economy and development of the Australian culture.
And the supply chains for businesses like Harrop and many, many others.
Correct. Holden began in Adelaide, but by the time General Motors merged with Holden to become GMH in the early 30s, they moved the headquarters to Port Melbourne, or Fisherman's Bend as we frequently refer to it. So, 1 million car. Some years later, we're at the 2 million car, so in between there would have been EH and HD and HR, and then we have the HK. So this one here is a Brom, however you want to pronounce that.
Well, it's interesting. I think it was 14 years to hit 1 million, and then it was only seven years, half the time to hit 2 million. momentum was building.
Well, of course, you know, Holden and Ford and Chrysler for that matter, the big three, had just dominated the Australian landscape. The next milestone car is the 3 million car is not here. The VB Commodore, or it would have been a VC by this stage, was the 4 millionth vehicle produced in Australia.
And the VB Commodore, I think, debuted 78, 79.
Yeah.
That model has really become the iconic for, you know, from the late 70s through to, you know, just recently.
Correct.
Commodore's
so the Commodore nameplate lasted a long time. By the time we got to VB, which was a shared architecture with Opel at the time, things became somewhat global after the fuel crisis of the 70s, and hence the smaller vehicle. When that settled down, we moved up to larger vehicles like the VN Commodore.
Yes.
So things changed yet again.
Which is probably a good time to jump in with your career. That kicked off with Holden, you mentioned in 88, right?
Correct. I started with Holden in 1988 and stayed until we closed the doors in 2020. So I had a 32-year career at Holden, and I can tell you I loved every bit of it. I worked on a lot of different cars, a lot of production cars, concept cars, which we'll see later. I worked in the Detroit studios for a while as well. And we used to, at Holden, work on a lot of other projects for the other GM brands. So not only did we design Holdens, but frequently Chevrolets, Cadillacs, Buicks, GMC, brands for the whole GM empire, and a great experience.
And the design studio was so well recognised for its capabilities, and the fact that it was originating from Australia for these global markets is a testament to you and the incredible team that I'm sure you had over the years.
A lot of talented people, and I don't say it just for Holden, for all of the Australian manufacturers and studios at Ford and Chrysler and others at the time. As a nation, punched above our weight. Relatively small population, one of the few countries that had the ability to design, engineer and manufacture in the same country. And not many other countries can say that with a population our size. I can think of Volvo maybe in Saab in Sweden, but they had all of Europe on their doorstep. And we were quite isolated, designing cars for Australia and New Zealand.
Well, punching above our weight, I think that's in our DNA. It's what us Aussies do best.
It's an Aussie thing, indeed.
Yeah. Let's sort of look through the generations now of the Commodore. It,
Yeah.
you know, it really started to ramp up in terms of the design language, and the volumes kept growing.
Not shown here would be the VN architecture. And then we've got the VT architecture. Now it's here as a VX, which would have been a facelift.
And VN would have been one of the first Commodore models that you were involved in 88.
Yes.
Did VN come out in like 89, 90?
It came out in later 88. And then directly after that, of course, were the other derivatives, so VPs and VRs, etc. And probably the one that really put us on the map globally in the late 1990s and early 2000s.
We'll look at some Monaros, which are based the two-door version, and the export markets for those that car's very popular in the US and in the Middle East as well.
For a while there, I should say, Holden was exporting to every continent. Commodores had different badges on them in different countries. They were sold as Chevys, Opels, Vauxhall, Pontiacs, because it really did fit the bill for an affordable, large car with a good performance and rear-wheel drive. I should mention as well that we exported police cars to North America as well.
The Caprice, yep, the long
Caprice,
wheelbase.
Yeah.
Well, there's a huge enthusiast market to modify those in the US, because the cruisers can get picked up relatively cheaply and they get hot rodded. So
yeah,
it's interesting. The Pontiac GTO is this sort of equivalent, and then the VE was the Pontiac G8, and then obviously the Commodore SS was the Chevy SS. So 6 million with the VX. 2008, the VE was really a game changer in terms of the Commodore architecture. Like the platform and everything really just went to another level, didn't it?
Indeed it did. This really was leaving the best till last. This was the first ground-up architecture since the HQ back in the early 70s. And it really was all new, and it was a global product. Designed left and right-hand drive from the start. It was the car we always wanted to make, and finally had the opportunity to do, given the success of the VT architecture beforehand and the export markets opening up.
We had 7 million with the VE, and then later, this was the very last car that went down the line here in South Australia in 2017.
Yes, so the VF Series 2 was the last Holden product manufactured in Australia. Didn't quite meet the 8 million mark, it was 7 million something by then, but this truly was our best performance of creating, engineering and designing a car, not just for our market, but all markets. And fair to say, it really did leave the best till last, where we always say, oh, it was the best Holden ever. Well, of course it was, because it's a later one. You would hope that's the case. But for its time, it was the best Holden we'd ever made, you know, in that period. Even today, it holds up against the competition, and it's years old now. But people love these.
The popularity of them, and so many of our customers love enhancing them with our products. So they've been an amazing platform for us as well. The Milestone cars are an awesome snapshot of the history over the years. But what we'd really like to take a look at is some of these concept cars, and you've got touch points with most of them. Let's start with Research Development Vehicle 001, the Hurricane.
Yes, the Hurricane, RD001.
Holden really set the bar pretty high in terms of design language, even the colour that it's finished in. It's pretty incredible, the Hurricane.
Yeah, this psychedelic car is indeed Holden's first concept car back
Groovy.
in 1969. It is pretty groovy, baby. If people ask the question, why do people make concept cars? What's the purpose of them? Well, here's your perfect exemplar. 1969, this car here has digital instrumentation. It has a reverse camera, has climate control, has a primitive navigation system. All these things you find at entry level now in a small car. But in 1969, that just was crazy stuff. But unless you explore, unless you push the boundaries, you don't get there. And that's exactly what this car does. Stuff that didn't exist back then, but it's looking forward to what could the future look like in a car. Now, the shape is just to showcase a slippery design. It's a Can-Am style cutback, slinky low sports car. It's actually loaded lower than a GT40, which is a 40-inch vehicle. This is 1 inch lower, hence it has no back window. It has a rear view camera. What cars had that back then?
That technology from 1969 is really mind-blowing.
Maybe some of the technology wasn't completely sorted out then, but it's all about prototyping it.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can make one. Now, how do we make this stuff at a commercial level that all people can enjoy and we take for granted today? It's got to start somewhere. The other thing that this car showcased was the brand new engine for Holden, an Australia-only 4.2 litre or 253 V8. Those people who had cars back in the 60s and 70s will know that engine was a talky little engine, 4.2. So it's not a big V8, but it was for the Australia-only market. And that's sitting in the middle of the car. So it had a bit of a GM part spin compilation. So we had oil-cooled brakes in the front.
Wow.
We had a Pontiac Tempest transaxle, the rear-mounted engine or mid-engine mounted engine, as I said, and a canopy that lifted up for entry, which included the instrument panel and steering column that went up with the canopy. And the seats also raised at the same time to allow for more easy ingress-egress, and then drop down again with the canopy.
So the Hurricane set the tone for concept cars with Holden. What came next, Richard?
Well, after the success of the Hurricane, shortly after was the Torana GTR-X. Let me show you that one.
Sleek lines were certainly the flavour of the day, early 70s.
Exactly. Long bonnets, long dash to axle. Like you say, order of the day, we're talking about E-Type JAs, we're talking about 240Zs, stuff like that. Now, this is 1970. So shortly after the success of the Hurricane, Holden released this concept car. Now, in reality, it was more than just a concept car. We often refer to these as precursor cars, where it's shown as a concept, but in reality, the intent is to make a production version. And this came pretty close to being that. It was designed, engineered, and intended for low-volume production. So it has, at the time, a fiberglass body on a rolling chassis, somewhat similar to a Corvette. Things were tough at the time, and the business case didn't quite add up, and they decided not to proceed with it, but they made a few prototypes, and this is one of them. Now, it's called a Torana GTR-X. It has a straight six triple carb XU1 engine in it, which over the years probably would have evolved even further. Great design. Look how wedgy it is. Wide, low, pointy, fabulous sporty interior. You know, it's a shame it didn't go into production because cars like this, like the 240Z, became super successful in the 70s. And everyone kind of wonders what would have happened.
I'm sure when this was displayed at the motor shows of the day, it would have been met with huge excitement and desire.
And I can certainly confirm that because I was a young boy and I remember seeing this car at a motor show when I was just a wee little fella.
Yeah.
And I was just blown away. And I remember my father got a brochure for it and I kept it for many years. I used to wonder, like, who designs these cars? Who creates them? Is there a job where you can do that? Can you sign me up right now? It wasn't until later that I realized the path to that is either industrial design or transport design.
Yes.
And that's the path I pursued later on, to RMIT to do industrial design. And knocked on the doors at automotive companies forever, always wanting to be at Holden, because my father had an EH that I loved as a child, and always wanted to be a Holden designer. And man, when that finally happened, I was over the moon.
It's an incredible journey. So such a beautiful car, and then there was a little bit of a hiatus in terms of concept cars at Holden. What came next?
Yes, there was quite a period in between, since the GTR-X, and sometime in the late 90s, we released the Holden VT Coupe, as we called it, affectionately known as the Monaro again, but it was actually called a VT Coupe at launch.
Almost modern day relative to the concept cars we've just looked at, but the Monaro was such a halo vehicle for Holden to showcase at the motor show, and I recall the interest in it was just massive.
Yes, it's a similar story to the GTR-X, where it was designed as a concept, but in the back of our minds, it was always intended for production. Now, this was a brainchild of Mike Simcoe, who was our design chief at the time. He always understood that there was a beautiful coupe lurking in that VT architecture. We had done the sedan and the wagon and the long wheelbase version of VT architecture, but we didn't have a coupe in our portfolio. And he always wanted to do one, and he came up with the idea, why don't we explore that? It lended itself very easily, had wonderful proportions already. So it's different from, let's say, the base of the A-pillar rearward. The windscreen's folded over a little bit more. Of course, the door is lengthened. The wheelbase is the same, but the overall overhang is slightly different, and the roofline overall is lower. But the interior is largely carryover in the front with special seats. And indeed, it's a great package for a coupe of its time. It went nuts at the motor show in 1998, and what transpired was something we always hoped would happen, that there'd be a groundswell. They would inundate our management with, you've got to build this, you've got to build this. Yep. That's exactly what happened. Now, Peter Hannenberger was coming on the scene at the time. He's our new CEO shortly after, and he was right behind it. And he said, right, what does it take to make a business case to make this vehicle? Now, the original business case was quite small, actually, because it was going to be one of those skunk works type projects. We're talking like low volume, like under 10,000 units, could probably break even. Ultimately, with export market and all the other extrapolations, we sold something like 40,000 of these cars all around the world. Great success story.
And the four-door version was selling in such strong volumes during that period. So it was Holden was just cranking along in terms of production volumes.
Yeah, indeed. They were halcyon days for Holden at the time. We just couldn't make enough vehicles to produce, or at least to satisfy the market. And once again, Peter Hannenberger had asked us to explore as many different architectures as possible. We also looked at later on the Crewman and the one-tonner. And that's part of the success of the Australian automotive industry, is the ability to improvise in low volume and make a business case. Whereas overseas, they wouldn't kick the doona off in the morning for volumes that we were talking about. But we found a way to make another car for low volume by using our head.
And a special mention for Harrop as well. This concept car is actually running Harrop brakes, which is pretty special to be.
And look, a lot of the vehicles you'll see around here have Harrop brakes and other Harrop contributions, and we're forever grateful.
So a vehicle that unfortunately didn't make production but inspired a huge amount of interest was the HRT 427. And this car is incredibly famous for the racing exploits at Bathurst, but also the potential for it to become a production car.
This particular model was meant to be a low volume vehicle of a 427 cubic inch or 7 litres. That's a lot of potential under the engine bay, with a view to have them for racing. I think it's 24-hour and all sorts of applications like that. So it was the pinnacle of this Monaro body style. Didn't quite make it into large-scale production, but a few of them exist, and they're highly sought after.
Yeah, I know the rear end is Harrop. I believe it's got a 9-inch, and it's this car that actually inspired us to build our Monaro 427. So you can check that out on the channel. So let's keep moving, because there's so many cars here to capture. What are we sitting in here?
Well, believe it or not, this is a convertible version of the Monaro. It didn't go into production, but it was one of those things we wanted to explore. The Coupe was so successful, our managing director said, why don't we look at a convertible version of this? So this was a car that was actually built overseas for us. We were just too busy at the time. And you can see it's a left-hand drive. We were looking for an export market for a convertible version of the Monaro. So this car was built. It's a fully running operational vehicle, and it generated a lot of interest. It didn't go into production, but I tell you what, it would have been very popular.
I think for the US market too, thinking about the popularity of Mustang from the blue camp, and there's a huge number of convertibles in the US, that this would have ideally suited that market. And Probably not so much the Middle East, but definitely in the US.
But you know, even the British love their convertibles, even though they have terrible weather.
And this vehicle's one of one. There was only
One of one, yeah.
Following VT, VX was the next model. We've got the Utester here. I can see it's also got the Harrop brakes, which is impressive. But this just isn't any ordinary ute, Richard.
No, this is what we call the Utester. Now, utes in Australia have a long heritage, but they tend to be workhorses. This is more of a show pony. So what we thought was, well, how can we sportify a ute and make it basically into your surrogate sports car? So it's essentially the same ute body we're talking about, but it has a lift-out roof, which stores in a small canopy behind the cabin. There's also a drop-down glass, so it feels like a fully open-air car, but it has all the practicality of a ute. It still has a tray in the back. It has a cool interior. We've got, you know, baseball-type stitching. In those days, multiple CD stackers. We're talking the early 2000s here. And just a fabulous stance.
Very impressive, but the Sandman, probably one of the most iconic concept cars, like the original. It's got some pretty wild graphics.
Oh, yeah. Well, the Ute and the Sandman are very closely related. They share the same architecture. Now, you recall the Sandman of the 70s. It was a surfy style culture. What we were looking at here was providing a OEM canopy, which could convert the Ute into a panel van. And of course, the Sandman was the pinnacle of that. So we thought, why don't we do that again? We engaged the services of Mambo, another iconic Australian brand, well known in the surf scene.
Absolutely.
So you see the nice flame work on the sides and some Australiana style murals.
Donated a surfboard for the roof racks.
The surfboard. The rear compartment is decked out with your obligatory mattress.
No shag pile, but it's got the right sort of themed cushioning.
That's correct. Well, we've got some nice velour around the sides and in the roof lining. So a very comfortable environment.
Big sound system, CD stacker, which was popular in the day.
This was super popular. It even went across to the States for a while.
So we've got the VX, continuing the journey. What followed next for concept cars?
Yeah, that was VY. So we can have a look at the SSX.
So in the early 2000s, I know some of the European, Japanese manufacturers were making that big push towards all-wheel drive. So that must have been the inspiration for this concept.
Yes, indeed. All-wheel drive was very topical in the early 2000s. So we explored yet another body style for the Commodore. In this case, it's a hatchback. So we call it the SSX, and it's an all-wheel drive. So we're talking about great traction and a more versatile body style with fold-down seats. It was really exploring, well, what can be the ultimate Commodore that can do everything? It's got the performance, it's got the grip, and a bit more practicality with the configuration in the rear. So this was very popular back in 2002 when we released this vehicle.
And also the 6-piston brakes on this vehicle are from Harrop as well. So that must have been very early days from the large 6-piston front calipers and rotors and 4-piston on the rear. So pretty nice to see that linkage. So let's keep moving. So there's some pretty wild concepts that came in the following years. So we showcased the GTR-X Torana, and Torana, like the Commodore nameplate, was one of the most iconic for the Holden brand. And then the Torana concept came along. So talk us through the inspiration here.
Yeah, we thought we'd revisit the Torana. It had a place in the hearts of Australians back in the 60s and 70s. We thought, let's give it another shot. So this is essentially a scaled down VE Commodore, exploring the idea of a slightly smaller package that could take 4 to 5 people with a V6 twin turbo. So in this case, we weren't intending for a V8, a bit of high performance V6, but rear wheel drive. So the main thing was Holdens were drivers' cars. And the idea was that yes, there are lots of front wheel drive cars around this size, but if you're a motoring enthusiast and you really want a rear wheel drive experience when driving, then this would have fit the bill. Again, it didn't go into production because we really needed the rest of the GM empire to chip in and help with the volumes. Couldn't quite get a business case to work, but it was great exploration of what the architecture could do by shrinking down that very versatile VE underbody.
And this would have been a little bit lighter than the VE platform, which would have made the handling, as a driver's car, this would have been, and this would have made a great race car as well, thinking about the dimensions and...
Yeah, if you think about BMW 3 Series, we're talking about a similar type of vehicle with a twin turbo V6 under the bonnet.
Or a supercharged V8.
Or a supercharged.
But the styling's phenomenal. The most iconic car we're going to get to very shortly, but the car on your left there was also met with massive accolades when it was revealed, and I'd love to hear the story how this almost went to production, the Coupe 60.
Let's have a look.
The Monaro is one of my absolute favourites. V8, rear-wheel drive, two-door. But when the Coupe 60 was revealed, I thought, wow, the proportions, the stance, this thing just has such presence. It's amazing.
Yeah, see, this is a truly beautiful car. And there's a bit of a story behind this one. After the success of the V2 Monaro, we were exploring yet another Monaro to share with Pontiac. And what we really wanted this time on the VE architecture was a pillarless coupe, something like the original Monaros had. We designed this car, it was ready for production, but things kind of got complicated because at the same time, we were developing the Camaro for Chevrolet. Again, built on the Zeta platform. So Australia was the homeroom to take that concept that the US developed and productionize it. So our design department completed the design work and made it a production vehicle. Engineering took over and made it a production-ready car to manufacture. It was built in Canada and then sold in the US. A truly global platform vehicle, starting right here in Australia.
And the Americans, obviously that 5th gen Camaro, the Transformers movie, we were fortunate enough, I think it was 2009, that we had one of the engineering vehicles from your facility that came out to Harrop, because I think we were looking at suspension and lots of upgrades around brakes. But I could see from GM Global's perspective, picking between the Camaro or the Monaro for the US market, or the Pontiac GTO as they would have branded it, the Camaro was always going to win out, unfortunately.
Yeah, correct. It's a no-brainer. Chevrolet is a much bigger brand, and to be honest, Pontiac found its demise not long after that. So it was the right decision, and the Camaro in America went crazy. It still has a Zeta, Holden underbody to it, but this would have been the replacement. So we thought we still needed to show the public the work we had done and what it might have been. So we gave it a different name. Rather than calling it Monaro, we commemorated 60 years of the Monaro and called it the Coupe 60.
Personally, I feel like this has stood the test of time from a design language perspective compared to the 5th gen Camaro, because the 5th gen Camaro was just so radical. And interestingly, it almost was offered in right-hand drive, but the economic environment of the day sort of put a block to that. But it was engineered to be able to be right-hand drive, the 5th gen.
Yeah, that's true. When we were developing the vehicle here in Australia, the deal was with Bob Lutz at the time in North America was that we could have a right-hand drive version since we'd done so much great work on it. It was designed, engineered, ready to go. Of course, the GFC came into play just at the wrong time and didn't make sense to invest that extra money for a low-volume vehicle. A shame, because it would have sold well here, as you've seen with the Mustang success later on.
Absolutely. Now, there's a crown jewel in the collection that we're going to highlight now, the absolutely iconic EFIJY. There's no doubt, Richard, without question, this vehicle is the ultimate Holden hero.
Well, this is the 2005 Holden EFIJY. Now, between the 1999 period and up to this period, we had a lot of success with all the other concept cars. And there was a groundswell in the public that at each motor show, we needed to come up with something exciting.
What's next?
What's next? So this was something I had in the back of my mind for many, many years, which was pay homage to the most iconic of all Holdens, the 1953 FJ Holden. Hence the name. It's an effigy of an FJ. And we thought, well, if designers had been let loose back in 1953, could do a luxury coupe version of this car, what might it have looked like? We slammed it. It's low, it's wide, it's long, it's 2 meters wide. It has a supercharged V8 under the bonnet, and we'll get to that in a minute with Harrop's help. It's a 2-door, as you see. Massive wheels, massive engine, and just a statement of style and proportion. And the real purpose of this vehicle was to showcase Holden's passion for automotive design and engineering in Australia.
And the heritage, which is so important. But interestingly, you mentioned to me that you originally did some sketches for this type of concept way back in like the late 80s, early 90s, when you were starting your career.
Yeah, correct. When I started at Holden in 1988, not long after, I was just musing over this idea with a companion at work, and we thought, wouldn't it be great? And we just did some quick doodles and pretty much parked it in the back of our mind thinking they would never do that in a big corporation like this. But many moons later, after the success of all these other concept cars, we thought, well, you know what? Maybe there is a time for it now. And it really build on the success we had with the other concept cars and tell the public, this is for you. It's not something we want to sell you. It's not a car we want you to buy. We just want you to enjoy it and to appreciate the skill sets that exist in this country.
And it wasn't something that was just unanimously signed off by the executive team either. Like it took some convincing internally at Holden to actually build it.
It takes a bit of lobbying to get anything over the line. And you can understand how something like this may have had a few people thinking, is that the right message to send doing a retro hot rod classic custom car when we should be focusing on production cars? But the counter to that is we've already established that. We make great cars and we've had all these other concepts which are super successful. This would touch another market which is not always fulfilled by your production cars. And that's the custom car scene. And that's a legitimate form of automotive design. And there are a lot of enthusiasts out there who love this kind of thing. And wouldn't it be great to connect with them in a way that demonstrates, well, yes, everyone customizes big American cars, but how about an Aussie classic? And sure, there's not a single part from this car that comes from an FJ. The proportions are Roger Rabbit style, but that's not the point. The issue was it has the DNA of that famous FJ Holden in it. And people just look at it once and go, yeah, that's an FJ.
It doesn't share a single part from the original vehicle.
Not a single part.
And let's talk through the design from the chassis is actually a C5 Corvette.
So we could have made a underbody for the vehicle. It's a fiberglass body, I'll say from the start. Could have made it from metal, but that would have been a lot more work and not necessary as a concept car. So we could have made an underbody for it, but we knew it had could have a global reach. So we looked at our GM Empire and the portfolio, and we thought, well, what about a Corvette underbody, which is a similar construction. It has a rolling chassis with an SMC body over top of it that could be taken off. And as it happened, we had one at the Proving Ground that had been doing testing for many years. And it was pretty much trashed in the body style, but the underbody was still great. And normally these cars would be crushed after they've done their service. So I said to the chief engineer, are you going to eat that? He said, why? What do you want it for? And I explained it. And he said, okay. So rather than being crushed, we repurposed that car, and it became the basis for this vehicle. It was a bit short. The wheelbase on a C5 Corvette is a lot shorter than this one. So we lengthened the frame, which is not hard to do. But one impediment we came upon was the torque tube. This has a transaxle, and we wanted it about 200 mil, or 180 mil to be exact, longer wheelbase. But as it turns out, those transaxles were made here in Australia at Unidrive. They helped us out with a longer version so we can get the proportions we wanted. We then reached out to other suppliers to say, do you want to be part of this? And that's where Harrop comes in.
Absolutely, yeah. We were thrilled to be part of such an iconic build.
Right, and I'm forever grateful, let me tell you. So it starts with the engine. Yes, it has an LS2 6-litre V8, but we thought with a bit more punch. And we knew that Ron Harrop used to race FJs in the old days. Yep. So we reached out and said, how would you like to be part of this project? And he was open-armed, and it was just a fantastic relationship. So we started with the supercharger. He also helped us out with the air intake area. We needed a special inline intake.
Oh, the symmetry on the engine bay is just beautiful. So I think that throttle body adapter was, designed specifically for FG.
Yes, Harrop made that especially for us with the EFIJY logo in it, because normally it turns off to the side, but we wanted it smack down the middle to integrate with the opening in the engine hood. So that was a great addition. We also needed your help with things like the wheels. We didn't have the capacity to machine wheels this large, so we had 20 on the front and 22 in the back.
Right.
You helped us out there, and these are great billet wheels. Hidden behind those solid wheels are the braking systems. So it's a 6-pot on the front, I think 4 at the back.
Correct, yep. Similar to the other concept cars, that's right.
Yeah, so big brakes to pull up this monster engine vehicle. There are a few other additions as well, the machining bits that you helped us out with, but those large ones were super, super important for us.
I think the rocker covers we also supplied, but yes. I know we were chatting and all of the metal here has been milled from solid.
Yeah, that's right. Everything you see that looks like chrome, or the bright work as we describe it, is all actually billet aluminium that's been machined and hand polished, because there were no parts from another vehicle that we could use, so we made them exclusively in-house. So like most of the other concept cars here, the whole car was made in-house in our Holden design facility, and we just reached out to people who had other skills that we didn't have in-house to help us complete the project.
And it was a skunk works style project, like it was a labour of love. You had so many within your team, and I think the talent that you had within your team to produce something like this, the vehicle speaks volumes, but I'd hate to imagine how many hours actually went into this.
Yes, I don't have an actual log because, like you say, it was a labour of love. A lot of the guys in the department just wanted to be part of it, and they were donating their time because we were very busy with other production work. And something like this had to fit in between. So a lot of it was done after hours, in our own time, or slotted in between where there were apertures.
And before we get to the touring and all of the accolades that it received, some of the tech that it had for 2005, and it's worth highlighting, it's its 20th anniversary this year. But you know, the electronics that were in the vehicle for 2005 was pretty groundbreaking.
So yes, it's a retro-looking sled, but it's packed full of technology. Now in 2005, you got to remember that a lot of the technology didn't exist then. So we were reaching out to suppliers and say, well, what can you do in terms of this or that? And for example, there's not a single globe in the car. Everything is LED, including the headlamps.
Which is common today, but revolutionary in 05.
Sure, the indicators and park lamps are LED for a long time, but headlamps only just breaking in now. So Osram helped us out with that. And these are super bright. In fact, they generated a lot of heat. So when we were developing it, we included heat sinks into the module, of course. But they were thinking, well, you know what? It's generating a lot of heat. I think we'll fan cool it as well. So I think we have a world first in fan-cooled headlamps. We have touchscreens inside to control all the functionality. Now, touchscreens, everyone's got that, right? Not in 2005. This was emerging technology. Proximity sensors, so there's no door handles, come in, it pops open. The whole car really, as you walk around it, showcases these kind of things. Even if you get to the rear, where you see the LED tail lamps that scrolling lamps are common now, but not in 05.
It's a very special colour. Did you have the inspiration early on, or was there debate in terms of the final colour?
Yeah, sure. I always had this in my mind that it would have a dark, sinister colour, and I kind of liked the idea of something not black. It was a bit too predictable. I really wanted something almost an eggplant colour. It kind of looked dark and sinister, but when the light hits it, it just pops. The mica flares, and the colour pops out. Together with the colour and trim team who developed the colour for us, and with House of Colour, I should say, the guys at House of Colour were great support, but we wanted something different from just their normal template of colours. So we developed our own. So it's actually based on a metallic or a mica blue base,
right,
with many coats of candy red over top of it, which basically gives you that purple colour. As we were talking about it, we needed to give it a name. And I said, it needs to be something sinister, like, you know, a gangster type colour, which Al Capone might associate with it. And one of the girls in the colour and trim area said, well, what about Sopranos? I said, that's it. So we call it Soprano Purple.
Beautiful. Richard, I feel incredibly privileged to sit in EFIJY. I've watched some videos of you driving at the Woodward Dream Cruise, and it must be an amazing experience to actually be out on the road and snapping necks.
One thing that we took great pride with at Holden was our concept cars were nearly always runners, because it gave credibility to the vehicle. It wasn't just a trailer queen. It would actually run. This one did, of course, and it was very successful in the US. It went to many shows, including the Woodward Dream Cruise that you mentioned. Now, for those not familiar with Woodward Dream Cruise, it's Woodward Avenue, which goes right through the center of Detroit for many, many miles. And once a year, it's a charitable thing where people bring out their classic cars and their hot rods and all sorts of automotive memorabilia and drive along Woodward Avenue.
Massively famous.
Oh, it's a great event.
For the US, it's one of the most well-known hot rod custom car events.
Massive outdoor event. I think it's the largest outdoor event in the US. And of course, Detroit is Motown. So they asked us to bring EFIJY to the show and drive it down Woodward Avenue and show the people. Yeah. Now, being a concept car, we needed special permission from GM that is, and to protect it because it's a concept car. So we had a bit of an entourage around us, right, with police guys on Harleys and big black SUVs.
And the accolades that the car won in the next 12 months or so over there is incredible. So just rattling those off.
Yes, it spent a whole year over in the States, actually, beginning at the Detroit Auto Show in January. Later on, it was nominated as the Concept Car of the Year in the US. The Hot Rod fraternity, of course, loved the vehicle, and the Hot Rod magazine, the preeminent magazine in the US, declared it the Hot Rod of the Year. Even ended up in Dubai at the end of that year, where an Arab sheikh wanted to buy it.
I've got no doubt, whether it's the exterior or the interior, the styling is just on point everywhere. Like it feels modern, yet period correct for 1953. It's a absolute stunning execution.
And that's exactly the intention. Like the exterior, the interior follows the same philosophy, where it's reminiscent of the original, but it's amplified many times over. So it still has the single dial at the front as your instrument cluster, but of course it's all LCD. It has a drop-down menu screen with a 50s style TV surround.
Yes.
All done in sepia tone. So it's reminiscent of the period of the 50s. The grille above that where the speaker would be, the font, the execution of all the detailing.
Blends in with the two-tone, colour for the interior great
Correct.
as well.
So the soprano purple rolls over into the instrument panel on top of the doors, and then we go into this cream leather interior. And we have actually maple floors rather than having carpet. We put maple timber, machined bits like inserts in the timber itself, and the pedals. You'll see it's got push-button automatic operation, which is kind of futuristic back in the 50s.
But even the buttons have got a mother of pearl finish, which gives that sort of historic vibe.
Correct. You can't see it so much in the images, but up close you can see the mother of pearl veins running through the materials, which is all on all the switchgear. The two-tone steering wheel.
And it's all billet.
That was machined in one piece, and then painted and trimmed.
So unfortunately we can't drive today. The weather's not great outside, and it's certainly on display here in a fairly confined area, but you have driven the car. What's it like to motor down and you've had it to the proving grounds. I've seen some footage of it on the proving grounds.
Yeah, sure. It was great to give it a bit of a shakedown at the proving ground, safely around the high-speed loop there. No, it gets up and boogies. It did, with a 6-litre supercharged engine. I think it was an estimated 480 kilowatts.
Yeah, well over 600 horsepower or 650 horsepower.
So, it's a big car, but it just lumbers along, and I tell you, it has a fabulous sound coming out the exhaust. Being a concept car, we didn't have to worry about compliance. So as I like to say, it has cats and dogs, just some catalytic converters and hot dogs, and those big trumpet machined outlets buried into the back of the body. Has a great bark to it.
Absolutely stunning. Well, undoubtedly, Richard, this is the crowning jewel of EFIJY, and the engine bay is very special.
Like you said, it's a jewel, and many customizers will refer to engine bays as a jewelry box. So you have this sparkling engine as a centerpiece, but we've also rolled the body in the same color and covering all the ancillaries. So what emerges out of that soprano purple paint is just the glistening engine with the Harrop supercharger sitting on top, and the air intake coming straight off the grille, right down symmetrically through the supercharger, and providing all that oomph.
Oh, it's massively impressive, and it's so exciting that Harrop had the opportunity to contribute to it. I think the car would look phenomenal driving down the road without the bonnet, given how spectacular the engine bay is and the whole front end. But thank you so much, Richard, for designing EFIJY on behalf of Holden fans throughout Australia and the world for that matter, and also for the opportunity to join me today to showcase all of these amazing cars at the Burwood National Motor Museum. It's an amazing facility for our viewers. If you're in South Australia, make the effort to come and see it, not only for the Holden vehicles, but so much Australian history here. It's very, very special. Thanks again, Richard, and thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time.